Jim Romer, Dr. Weather. They call me a doctor, not because I have a PhD in meteorology. I have a PhD in living on 4 hours of sleep a night, playing tennis with a bad elbow since I was 12 years old, a PhD in agriculture and learning about commodities and advising for 35 to 40 years. This video, look at it over the weekend, will be at least 10 minutes in length. We're going to talk about Corn Belt weather. We're going to talk about El Nino that's now officially dead, but I don't think La Nina is going to form anytime soon. We talk about soft commodities and weather forecasts. So, first of all, why has natural gas prices, which rallied earlier this past week, not made new highs on a hot weather forecast? Why are corn and soybeans kind of yawning right now? This huge dome during the course of the next week or two over the Midwest. It's kind of too early to get excited about droughts. And usually, when El Nino conditions continue, and some of them have been around a little bit, there's still some weak El Nino conditions, even though officially El Nino is dead. I'll explain this in a minute. You did tend to see good moisture. So, this was the drought situation in Iowa and Nebraska, Minnesota about 2 or 3 months ago. I predicted a month and a half ago the drought once again would ease. Look at the map to the right in white. Droughts had pretty much ended over much of the nation except for the far southwest plains. And as a result, bean prices and corn prices are not really reacting to hot weather forecasts right now. In addition, we have seen demand, as you know, really, really terrible. Otherwise, we'd be $1 higher in soybeans here on South American weather problems over the last month, and that's kept soybeans in a downtrend. There also may be some flooding in the far northwest corn belt. So the combination of good soil moisture, good early crop conditions, and maybe some replantings in the far northwest belt has kept beans under pressure. Here's why soil moisture looks. So even though it's been dry the last week or so, there's been flooding, particularly up in Canada and the Northwest Corn Belt. Good moisture, actually. They don't really need any more rain right now. But notice the Corn Belt as a whole is not really dry except a few areas of west central Illinois and maybe northern Missouri. Not a big deal yet. And that's why the grain market is yawning right now at hot weather forecasts. I've seen many times over the years there's a dome and it never materializes and there's rain in the dome. Okay, so this is the forecast the next 10 days, up to 4 to 6 inches of rain from two systems in the northwestern and western corn belt. So things are pretty good for the most part right now. 90s will not hurt the crop yet, but there could be some replanting with tornadoes, severe weather, and flooding returning later this weekend and much of next week to the far northwestern belt. So what about El Nino and La Nina? So trillions of gallons of water has fallen in Florida, my hometown here, over the last few days, breaking a drought. Incredible. And this is because of record warming oceans that have occurred, as well as occasional El Nino conditions. We have an El Nino neutral situation right now when you see rainfall like this. Though this was a once in a thousand year flood because the oceans have warmed, in my opinion, from climate change for sure, not solar activity. Yes, you get wet weather in the southeast, but it typically happens with El Nino conditions, not with La Nina. Matter of fact, flooding in Europe, that's not really caused any rally at all on the wheat market, as we have good harvest pressure in the US and a big crop. That's also tends to be an El Nino neutral or El Nino phenomenon. So even though El Nino is officially been forecasted to have ended now, there are still occasional global weak El Nino conditions. I know that's kind of confusing. So this is the situation. How many times with a strong El Nino that we had about 6 months to a year ago does it lead to La Nina? If you look at this chart in the dark area there, I think in black and red, you'll see that about half the cases that were strong La Nina events were no La Nina by the end of the summer and fall. Yes, a few there on the bottom were, okay, like I think 1983, obviously a bad drought. Some of the other years in the mid 50s became a La Nina after being a strong El Nino. 1997, for example, became a La Nina by 98, 99. But there have been several cases that it was only an El Nino neutral. What does that mean? Volatility, going to be very complicated, volatile weather around the world. The flooding rains in Florida and also the Northwest Corn Belt is an indication the SOI index, the difference in pressure between Tahiti and Australia, is fluctuating occasionally negative. As you see that SOI index fluctuate, and it's actually negative right now, that is a sign that La Nina is not upon us. El Nino neutral conditions. As a matter of fact, this was the forecast on the left back in March. Cool ocean temperatures in the Pacific along the equator, about 1.5 to 2 degrees below normal. Look at the forecast a month ago, and actually now, not quite as cool in that circle. So not only do you have the SOA index being negative, but you have the ocean temperatures not cooling as quickly as some models and many other forecasters have predicted. So some of the other forecasting techniques that we're going to be using for the Corn Belt weather and global commodities is the heat waves and droughts in Mexico. Look at that. 2022 and 2011. Forget El Nino and La Nina for a second. When we had droughts in Mexico, tend to have a very hot summer. So this may eventually help natural gas. Those stocks are very, very large, and the market already rallied about 10 to 15% on the psychology of this hot weather over the last week or two. Getting natural gas above 3 or 350 is difficult when you have stocks this large, but this will be important for Corn Belt weather. What else is going on in commodities right now? Well, after a major spike in orange juice and citrus greening, and also the droughts in Brazil helping juice make all-time highs here in the last couple months again, rains in Florida broke the orange juice market, as well as the stronger dollar. Coffee, bullish and bearish signals. The Vietnam crops come down, but there's rains in the forecast for Vietnam, a little bit late to really help their crop. And we also have no frost potential in Brazil, a stronger dollar, and harvest pressure. So that's why my weather spider that's in my Weather Wealth newsletter for clients all over the world in corn, soybeans, natural gas, and soft commodities is in the neutral category right now. Look at global crops. Look at the technical analysis. When we see spiders that are bullish or bearish, I recommend puts or calls or futures or ETFs. Right now, we're going to be in a very volatile market as far as coffee goes. And sugar. Hey, that guy looks like me, doesn't he? Okay. We got a strong season to go long, and there's a drought in northern Brazil that may affect the 2025 crop. But we also have to watch the lower Brazil real, what crude prices do, and also the Indian monsoon. If the Indian monsoon ends up being weak again in the next month or two, and occasional El Nino conditions hold, even though NOAA said it no longer exists, if we see some occasional conditions here or there, and the monsoon weakens again in India, if this drought continues in Brazil, then we'll see sugar prices actually go higher. My spiders, again, for all commodities in my newsletter, talks about various option strategies, ETFs, things like that, based upon my spider scores, which includes, again, technical analysis, temperature indices, global crops in different countries, and the economic and seasonality score, and of course, technical analysis, pattern recognition. That pattern recognition of -2 about 3 weeks ago is now a +2 in sugar. So my spider's actually slightly more bullish. But will that change? Will India get rain? What about the dollar? We'll be recommending all the time in our newsletter updates frequently in all these different commodities. Finally, the record warm global winter, as well as in the United States, is also going to be an indication for me to make some forecasts based on these analog years you see here. Very confusing. Which were El Nino neutrals? Which were La Nina? Which were El Nino with record warm summers? That's what I'm going to be looking at. Is solar cycles a factor? There's two of me. No, not in my opinion. Okay, so the temperature over the last 150 years has been soaring globally. We all know that. It's not because of El Nino or La Nina, folks. It's because of the record warm warming oceans. Look at the solar radiance, though, in yellow. Okay, kind of fluctuating, a little bit hard to see. But the point of this is with solar maximums or when solar radiation went down like it did up to the last couple of years there over my shoulder, look how global ocean temperatures warmed anyway. Now we see solar activity actually increasing. This yellow line you see here was as of maybe 3 or 4 years ago. We now have solar activity increasing, but the bottom line is it doesn't matter. Active sun, inactive sun, the global climate is warming. So anyway, as a Weatherwell subscriber, you can ask me a question once a month. Feel free to email me, go to my website. Have a great summer. A lot of volatility in markets based on El Nino neutral conditions, not La Nina the next 2 or 3 months, in my opinion. Enjoy.